Today I want to talk about something that's been weighing on me for pretty much my whole life. And that is a label that I inherited from a very young age as being a perfectionist. I was always looked at as being like academically advanced. I learned how to read by age 3. By grade 1 I was writing in cursive, and I was getting in trouble at school for doing things that were ahead of the curriculum. I like to be 100 steps ahead. I would come home with my report card, and if I got anything less than an A, sometimes even an A+, I would cry, like hysterically. I would never cry in front of people either. I would go to my room and cry because I didn't want them to feel the shame that I felt. It wasn't something that I ever want to put on anybody, but I felt it. Hand in hand with that, I grew up playing sports at a competitive level. I developed a win or lose mentality. I hate losing. I hate giving up. I hate letting go. I hate having to feel like I didn't do enough. Because I feel like in any situation, you can always do your best, but sometimes failure is inevitable. With that being said, I feel like that's where it roots from for me. Academics and my life as an athlete, I feel like those two together concocted a high stress mindset for me that really led me to struggle with perfectionism. It also pushed me to succeed. So it's like a double-edged sword. I feel like in so many ways I would always push myself to a point of exhaustion, but the outcome always felt so good, where I was constantly chasing whatever that thing that's released in your brain when you feel really good. I craved that, like I was starving for it. The feeling of failure was something that would make my skin crawl. I feel like that manifested into so many really negative things in my life. That in itself manifested at a young age to a 7-year-long eating disorder, which was absolutely horrible for me, but it was my way of maintaining control. And that was the root of it, because there was so much going on in my life that I couldn't control. I couldn't have the ability to change it. So I took control of things in my life in such a toxic way that ended up causing so much damage to my physical health. And thank God I have healed and I have not relapsed, but it's part of it. I definitely see where those things kind of transfer into that. Another big thing that I find myself, and I think many other people with a similar mindset struggle with, is being able to accept help. Like, I will not accept help. You could hand me $1 million and I'll give it back to you and be like, I'll find my own way. I don't like asking for help with the simplest of things. I don't like depending on others. I don't like outsourcing when it comes to making things work. Even going to therapy, when I'm seeking help, I always already had the answers. I would already sit and come up with things, and my therapist had to sit with me and say, you intellectualize so much trauma. You are always trying to find the why, the how, the what, and understand it perfectly, which is great because it saves me the time, but that's exhausting for you. And it is, but that's a switch I haven't learned to turn off just yet. I really want to talk about the concept of releasing that perfectionist mindset when it comes to things that no longer serve you, like relationships. Me and my former partner, we were engaged for 5 years. When I started to realize that my relationship was falling apart, that fear of failure really set in a way that I don't even think I can fully describe. And I feel like when you are raised, not necessarily raised, but conditioned to function in a way that aligns with that perfectionist archetype, you like develop the most disturbing level of tolerance for things. I would take any pain, stress, heartache before I ever admit that it hurts me. Still to this day, I have a hard time crying in front of people. I find that I'm very transparent because I like to focus on finding solutions, but at the same time, I really struggle with showing weakness. When it came to my relationship, I was tolerating abuse on a daily basis just because I was so scared of having to experience a failed relationship. At that point, when we already had a child, there was a whole video about the engagement and the wedding planning process, and there was just so many eyes and so many opinions and so much hope and dependency that being the one to pull the plug on all of that was a really difficult thing for me to do. When I saw that my child was being affected by me holding on to something and that it would benefit him more for me to let go, I did. I didn't say anything to anyone. I did not want to ever admit the fact that the relationship was done, that there would never be a wedding, that my child would no longer have a two-parent household, but that's just what came with it. It's one thing to take on that failure. I know that's a bad way to phrase it, but for me at that time, that is the reality that I felt. I felt like I had failed. I had failed as a partner. I had failed my family by bringing shame to them, by being somewhat of an anomaly. Not that like they ever expressed that, but my parents were high school sweethearts. They've been married for, I want to say 30 years, a little more than that. None of my aunts are divorced. None of my uncles are divorced. None of my immediate family really had that. So it was never really modeled to me in a way that could be functional. I only ever really saw those things on TV, and the way that that stuff is portrayed can really mess with your head. I didn't really have a blueprint to follow, and I just took that leap. There is always a silver lining. You are not a failure because you could no longer tolerate pain and abuse. You are not a failure because you choose to do things alone rather than having your child be exposed to a household that's not happy or healthy. You're not a failure for letting somebody else have to deal with their own struggles because they're trying to drag you down with them. You're not. And that's something I have to remind myself of. Now that I have finally found my footing, I'm so okay with the idea of letting go of things. I do it too often. I feel like now like the switch flipped and I'm like, failure is something I embrace because there is always something better to come. It is not the be all end all. It is not a permanent label or a stamp that you will wear on your forehead for the rest of your life unless you want to go and get that tattooed, but like it's just not. And when you can take accountability for the things that go wrong, just as much as you want to take ownership of the things in your life that go almost seamlessly, that is where true peace and happiness lies. I know that at this point in my life, there is an abundance of opportunities. I feel like within having that perfectionist mindset, I lacked the ability to see the abundance that this world had. I would see it as this is where I need to get, and it's either I get here or it's nothing. Meanwhile, there is so much all around there that I'm missing because I am so focused on the one objective. I don't know the terminology where they're like season, era, whatever, but like this is the time in my life of the most transformative change. I've really been able to reconnect with who I am and not just identify as somebody who is a perfectionist, who always has to get it right. I get it wrong a lot, and now I enjoy getting it wrong because there's usually 2 or 3 other outcomes that I would have overlooked if I wasn't okay with getting it wrong. And it's led to so much prosperity in my life. So just because things don't work out how you want them to, or how it looks in the movies and on TV, and your life isn't perfect, that honestly in every way I find that it makes it so much more unique. I don't know. I don't know if any of this makes sense, but there's no shame in changing your story. Yeah.